So this is the August 22nd meeting of the Norwood Town Meeting Rules Committee. The first item of business is election of the secretary, which I suppose we should do before we address the minutes. Any volunteers and/or nominations for secretary?
Can I suggest before we do that, we do
Yes.
self-introduction since we're still a fairly new committee
That's
and
fine.
our viewing audience?
That's true.
Sure, good idea. All right, why don't we start?
So I'm Amanda Groh. I'm representing District 7 for this committee.
I'm Erin Egan. I am representing District 5, I think. Yes.
I'm Peter McFarland from District 3.
Jean Farrar Taylor, District 8, happy to be on here.
Terry Slater, District 4.
Eric Bodenhofer, District 9.
John Hall, District 6.
And Mike Riley, District 1. So, volunteers and/or nominations for secretary, which is basically.
All volunteer.
Okay. Any other nominations and/or volunteers? All those in favor?
I was gonna volunteer,
I'll second John.
Quinn.
Volunteer
I was, but she's not here.
Yeah, the price for not showing. All those in favor of John as the secretary?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Secondly, the minutes I sent around to everybody. I haven't received any comments. Is there a motion to accept the minutes?
Motion to accept the
Is
minutes?
seconded?
Second it.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't here.
Fair enough. Consent agenda. And I want to start by thanking John for the material he sent around, which was very helpful.
I did my homework. I actually sat and went through the town meeting book, our last town meeting.
You didn't bring the fresh one.
Because I, no,
That's
I did
not the new one.
I
That is-
absolutely did
this is
not.
the new
Nope,
one.
I didn't. And, you know, it's funny, because I gave more thought to the consent agenda in general. And I know that it's because I've had over 30 years of doing it without it, and I know it's an asset. So I think it's going to be good, but I think we have to tread a little lightly. John, your paper was great. I enjoyed that. It helped a lot. I think that I wrote some of the things down because I know it's too soon to make any, actual motions and put them on the table.
Can I just make a suggestion, Gene?
Absolutely.
Just to try to structure
Sure.
things to move us along. My thought was, and I think it fits into what you were just saying, that maybe if we could start with the idea of, is it kind of the consensus that we want to go down the road of consent agenda as a concept? If the answer to that is yes, then go through, and it's kind of what John came up with and what I came up with. First, what motions ought to be eligible for consent agenda? Secondly, who should prepare the consent agenda, come up with the items? Third, what should the format of the document be? And then fourth, what should the procedure at town meeting be? And if we can work.
Could you do your third one again?
Sure, the format of the document. And if we can work through that and come to a consensus, I'll be happy to take a shot at a motion that we can then, send to you before the next meeting. We can work from a particular motion. Because there's a lot of stuff, and so I just thought it might be helpful if we try to have some structure.
What, straw poll it to see who's thinks that we should go more?
Yeah.
we should
Anybody
move
think that
forward-
we-
move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why don't we start on that, on just the general question of what are people's thoughts about, is the concept of consent agenda worth the effort we're gonna spend on it?
So I'll weigh in, Jane. I think it's worth pursuing, and, it's going to be, to your point, Mike, it's going to be how we do it. And, maybe if we start with the concept of it and build on that. But I definitely think if we look at the last annual town meeting, I believe there were 53 motions, and we'll say it's a little bit of debate. I don't know how you could be a debate. I'm hearing between approximately half of them had no discussion. A little more than half of them didn't
Yeah,
have
I
any
heard
discussion.
19, but that's pretty close to what you're
Yeah. So, with that being said, if we can procedurally kind of move through items quicker, that would make it more, I think, a more beneficial town meeting.
I'm in favor of it, and more or less what Jerry was saying and Gene was saying too, as far as, if, I think it works well with the annual. I don't think it will work at all with the specials, because the specials, the only thing that would work on a special is if somebody put a placeholder in, and it, and we have 2 or 3 indefinite postponements or something like that. That's the only place I could see it working in a special, because everything, the only reason it's on a special is to get action, so, but as far as on the annual, we have many annual authorization articles, authorized for revolving funds, authorize the treasurer, authorize the selectman to authorize the treasurer, so those things happen all the time. So I think those would fit into consent agenda, and same thing as if we have indefinite postponement. So, I mean, those things I think we can package into consent agenda. And as far as that goes, how we do it, and I think we'll be talking about that part more.
Yes, Jim?
I would say yes, and as Jerry said, depending on how it's done. But in the spirit of what Gene was saying about going slowly, I think we have to keep our expectations low about how much of an impact this will have. I don't think that we can assume that all of the motions, or even most of the motions that had no discussion as it turned out, will be offered up as good candidates for the consent agenda. So the approach that I tried to outline here, which I think parallels what other towns have done, is you give a lot of people a chance to knock things off, the candidates for the consent agenda, before you even ask the town meeting members, and they can knock anything else off that they want to knock off. So we may end up with a very conservative approach in the first year, where there are only a handful of motions, and you want people to get comfortable with it, because with limited aspirations comes early successes.
Okay. John, when you say town meeting members to add items,
Not add,
Oh, okay.
delete items from the consent agenda.
delete items, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't, because I'm like, how that would be done, okay, never mind.
And I would second the notion that, we can't expect it to have huge results at first. For me, I'm neither for or against it at this point. I like the concept of it on paper, but whether it'll functionally impact us depending on the content of our meetings. Right now, I've been spending some time manually pulling down the time logs of other towns' town meetings and what the subject matter of their town meetings are. And I'm trying to only focus on towns that are similar to ours. I'm getting everything from some that are in line with us to some that are way shorter to some that are way longer. And so I'd like to see if we're the outlier, or, are the ones that are using the consent seeing results. So for me, I'm more data driven. But I like the concept of it on paper, and I think like starting the process and trying it and seeing if we get results, it won't hurt anything.
It's funny that you're saying that, because I was surprised at town meeting when it was presented, the way it was presented, that so many town meeting members seemed to feel that they would have done it that night.
Yeah.
I
think
was
that's true.
really surprised, because it looked good on paper. Plus, when you look back at it, we wouldn't have been right in doing it, because you need at least 3 days to present something that's going to be a consent agenda. So we really couldn't do it that night, because it wasn't presented before that. But I was surprised, because it does look good on paper.
So, I think it's fair to say there's a general consensus we've got to go down this road. So now if we move to the question of what should be on there, and again, what I did just try to give us a focus is kind of went through a list of things, and we can maybe discuss them one by one and decide if we agree they should be on a consent agenda or not, assuming we come to a procedure about how to get there.
So Mike, can I throw out the idea of saying that, as somebody has already said it, maybe we talk annual rather than special?
The only thought I'd say is, I think we can have a rule that says you can use a consent agenda
Anytime.
anytime.
Anytime?
And that doesn't mean it has to, and I think it's likely that At a special, probably not. But sometimes there are specials that are a lot of transfers of, between accounts and so I don't think we need to rule that out because, as John said, I think we want to come up with a process that if anybody's trying to ram something through, there's a lot of different ways to stop that. So
That's fine.
So that actually point I've been thinking about since our first meeting when we started talking about an enumerated list of, and I kind of question whether that has actual value or whether it's, let's establish what a consent agenda is meant to accomplish, which is to deal with non-controversial motions that are not going to be discussed, and leave it to the people who we decide should put together this consent agenda to decide what those are, and then leave it to town meeting to decide whether or not they're right. Like, I think if we make this such a complicated, convoluted process, I think, one, we're not giving proper respect to our Board of Selectmen if they're gonna have a role in this. We're not giving proper respect to our town moderator if he or she is choosing to do this. And we're not really giving proper respect to the ability of our town meeting members on the meeting floor to voice their objection. And so I think if our process is anyone who is a proponent of a motion, so be it the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, the school committee, although I can't imagine they would ever, have anything that they would think was non-controversial, put something on there, then it's presented to the body as a whole, and we come up with whatever the process is for someone on the floor to knock it out, right? So maybe it's, one person is enough, which I think would not make sense. Maybe 5, that's like, if you get 5 people, maybe that's too many, but I feel like we I don't know that we have the ability to really decide an enumerated list that's going to make sense. I think if we create a philosophy about this, get buy-in on that, and then let the people who really are responsible for these things make a determination whether or not they think it's worthy of the consent agenda, and then we leave it to the body to decide whether it stays
I mean, I
on.
suppose one halfway place is some general description of what we're talking about with, for example.
Certainly. Yep.
Right.
To give some sense of what we're talking about here, but
Yeah.
then still leave discretion. I mean, that's another
I
thought.
mean, it seems to me that it's going to be fairly obvious to the meeting what shouldn't have been on there. If someone's really gone out of bounds, right? We're going to immediately see it, and people are going to. So.
They're very specific in Robert's rules. It's no contracts, no permits, no grants, things such as
we're
that.
not
We don't
subject
use
to
Robert's
Robert's
rules in town meeting.
I mean,
But
they're a
but
they're a
Robert's
guidance,
rules
but
are
they're not.
applied to consent agenda.
No,
No.
we can do whatever we want.
And we're not ruled by Robert's Rules of Order either.
Even though
Yeah.
consent agenda falls under Robert's rules.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
It
all-
arose from,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, every motion we have comes from Robert's rules,
Right,
but
right.
we're not bound by
We're
it.
not driven by Robert's.
And I had put down a couple for the examples, like indefinite postponement, moderator salary, stipends, small expenditures under 1,000, town common maintenance, vets, fuel assistance, economic development, things that are always basically the same.
Thinking about it, and what Eric was talking about, and what I did was, when I just pull out the annual town meeting and look at what was on the warrant. Because, when we get into the money articles, I think we'll spend way too much time talking about what we're not gonna talk, but we will, get into the, what was it, Article 8, I think, Article 8 is when we talk about the budget. I don't want to be sitting there going, some of these we can go through is just as fast by just saying it, not going through the articles. It's like we pull out, 27, articles out of 50, items out of the budget. I think we spend more time, because he's going to be reading it off, okay, general government, 122 selectmen's, we go through that whole list of litany of things. I'm talking about articles, and as far as like, okay, what articles do we have on the annual town meeting? Article 1 is reports from officers in town, that's, if somebody wants to get up and give a report, they give a report, that's what the time to do it. Article 2, authorize the collector of taxes to use the name The means as a town treasurer may use as acting as collector. That's an annual authorization. That's what I'm talking about as far as putting in the consent agenda. That one. The next one article is, authorize the expenditure of Chapter 90 funds. Number 4 is authorize the treasurer to, to do some, I think it's short-term, short-term lending from the banks, things like that. So those are always on the annual, no matter what we do. And that's what I'm talking about as far as put those type of articles. Sure, we can bundle those up and then be done with them,
So just in terms of trying to get to some words, if we said something, and we need to work on the language, if we said something like, eligible for the consent agenda is non-controversial routine motions, something like that. For example, and then like,
I don't want to challenge anybody by saying non-controversial.
You don't want to
I
say
know,
non-controversial.
I don't want to
hard,
say
yeah.
that. I
But
would
you could say routine.
I would
Routine.
say just annual, articles of annual authorizations.
Well, but that's
That's
a big.
yeah.
No, but that's what these articles are.
Some
They're
of them
not
are.
big, that's what they are.
Why would you not want to use the term non-controversial?
Yeah, I mean.
Because I think you're challenging somebody to make it, I think it's controversial then, we'll be doing it.
But honestly,
Always
if somebody thinks that, it
shouldn't
shouldn't
be
go
there.
by consent agenda.
Well, I mean,
Or
If they want to raise their hand and say it in some, at least
Yeah.
one or two other town meeting members.
Yes, John.
Sorry.
I think we're gonna get objections to almost any general language. I agree with Peter.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna get objections to an enumerated list of what's in and an enumerated list of what's out. So my approach in the letter I sent out was, let's start with the process. And every town has somebody who's responsible for putting together the proposed consent agenda, and then a process for allowing the townspeople, town members, to knock things off of the consent agenda. For the most part, they don't have any hard and fast rules about this should be in, this should be out. But they also don't tend to say how a large group that they wanted to have involved in the draft, including the moderator, the finance commission, and the board of selectmen, you can't give an assignment to 11 people. So what I thought we were talking about last time was a 3-stage process. The first stage is the moderator comes up with a draft. The second is it passes to all the other important people, and they get to knock things off. Any one of them can knock anything off, it's final. And then that list becomes the proposal to the town meeting, and any one of them can knock anything off. In order to try to make it easier to figure out how that is, that's where the examples come in. And I had some language proposing, here's some examples of things that are more likely to be appropriate for a consent agenda. And that's the word I used, appropriate, because I was trying to avoid words that would get it to the
Challenging.
substance.
Yeah.
And here are the sort of things that would be less appropriate. I didn't go so far as to say anything involving money is less appropriate. Although there are documents that you handed out that would suggest that we should consider that. I figured if we just say anything could be on it, but it has to get past these 3 hurdles, and we see what actually does. And then the next time around, the people who are shaping it from the beginning will have a better sense of what's going to fly, and there'll be a lot less work for the people downstream to do with the next proposed draft. The moderator may get in the habit of putting in things that have proven to be good for the consent agenda, and a couple things to try, but a modest number of things to test.
So couldn't you, if you thought about it, the way the process works, to develop the town meeting agenda, or any of the town meeting agendas, is there is a process that's led by the town manager and the selectmen. And then it moves to the motions meeting, where they obviously, they decide on what's going to finally going to be on, the selectmen obviously vote everything that's going to be on town meeting agenda. The motions meeting is when they actually kind of go through the cadence. Couldn't we incorporate this into that? So not only utilize the existing process, the folks that are involved in the existing process, and then utilizing the motions meeting or a similar meeting, which involves the moderator, the selectmen, the FinCom, if they choose to join that as well, town manager. That's when they would determine what they would propose to put on the consent agenda. That's your agreement there. And then the ability to take something off of consent agenda would come from town meeting floor. And town meeting floor, and then it would be for us, and I did have a conversation with a couple of town moderators, coincidentally, including a former town moderator from Concord. And they said they started like with 5 people. They started there, not one, because one,
Yeah.
5, and then they've over time have actually gotten to higher numbers of
People who object.
needing to throw it up. But they started there, and again, they left it to the group that actually puts together the agenda.
So, I mean, I want to go.
Question, what's their quorum size in Concord?
125 roughly?
Concord.
Oh, Concord, oh.
Yeah, I don't know offhand. I couldn't,
Are they
and
open
they're,
or representative?
Yeah.
That's another thing too.
no, they're elected.
Just to put what you've said, Jerry, into the context of the materials Mike distributed, there was only one of the 5 or 6 towns that had more than one person required to knock things out. They had 5. There was,
Makes sense.
so I was under the impression that the town with 5 was the outlier, not the other way around. Also, the approach that you're taking sort of leaves mysterious the process by which the selectmen get something in front of them to vote on. Like the composition of the motions. And one of the things that I think may come up on our agenda later on is we talked last time about, can we get them to think about combining or uncombining items? And this is more of a problem if you were dealing with budget items as eligible motions. With the notion that if you combine things, you have less work to do, but you increase the odds that the most controversial part of a generally uncontroversial combined item is gonna get knocked out for that reason.
So, John, can I ask you to just start, I mean, I didn't quite understand that not knowing how the selectmen,
Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. You were saying that the first thing that happens is the selectmen vote on what goes on the agenda.
that's true, they have to, the
Right.
articles.
And where do they get the list that they're voting on?
They're getting them from the various committees in town, so they may get some from the school committee, they may get some from the town manager, who's getting it from different departments. They may
Okay.
get some from the FinCom.
So in a way, you're bypassing the step where the moderator has done some flagging of things that aren't appropriate.
I think we're talking about
There's 2 different things.
designing the
Besides
warrant.
warrant.
Put
Yeah,
articles
and then
on the
that comes
warrant.
after.
Right.
And then
Yes,
selectmen sign
That's
the
the
warrant.
current process.
And-
But what I heard from Jerry was that you thought we might integrate our new process into that existing process.
No, I'm talking further downstream,
Ah, okay.
further downstream.
I mean, I guess one thought I have is, the difference between coming up with a rule and how that rule gets implemented. So I think I kind of agree with John. It's just my approach generally. If 6 people have to do something, nobody has to do it. So if you say the moderator needs to come up with the first draft, and then the board, selectmen and the FinCom can knock things off, that could all be done at that meeting you're talking about.
Right.
I mean, I don't know that we bake that into the rule. I mean, they're sensible people, and people don't want to have meetings they don't have to, and they may very well say, yeah, we're gonna have a warrant meeting, and at the warrant meeting, we're also gonna consider, you know, Mr. Town Moderator, Mr. Town Moderator's list. So I think that's likely the way it happens, but I think in terms of the procedure, I think it is useful to say, and I think the moderator is a sensible person to come up with the first shot at it, and then let people opt things out.
Well, I think the process should just be left up to the moderator. And the moderator, the language for the moderator is to consult as to the people appropriate, you know, that, you know, if he has to ask somebody about this, he can go to that person, ask them, you know, town clerk, town accountant, town manager, or the selectman. It could be whoever, he can consult with who he thinks is appropriate to ask about these articles. And then put the draft, present it, and give it to us. I think it should be in writing before the meeting, that's all.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Um,
I mean, I agree it should be right in the meeting. My own opinion is it's a good idea to run it through the Board of Selectmen and the
Well,
FinCom.
yeah, but
And if somebody there objects, they're gonna object at the meeting anyways. It's just, you know, and that, because then when you go to town meeting, you say, this is a consent agenda that, for whatever you think it's worth, the Board of Selectmen, the FinCom, and the town meeting moderator have all agreed these are appropriate items for the consent agenda.
Now, just to work through the implications of what you just said, if I've got it right, the moderator looks at the candidate items and comes up with his list of what would be on the consent agenda and what would not. This passes to the Board of Selectmen, who decide the final list of items to be on the agenda and takes the moderator's list as a starting point for the sorting, and then can move things from the consent agenda list to the not consent agenda list if any one of them feels that way. And then you get the review by the FinCom?
No, that's more complicated, I think, than what I'm
we'll
saying.
never get it done.
Yeah,
Ready to
what-
get-
what-
Where does the FinCom
what-
come in?
What I'm suggesting is, the meeting happens where the warrant comes up. The moderator takes that list and says, these are the ones I propose for the consent agenda. He gives it to the FinCom, he gives it to the Board of Selectmen. If any member of either of those boards says, no, it's off, whatever's left goes to town meeting.
So it's not necessarily connected to the meeting that are already being.
No, they may
had by
decide,
the
they're gonna
motions- the
do that
motions.
however they wanna do
The
it, and they may
motions.
decide that's a good
How
time
far
to
in
do it.
advance is that done?
Motions meeting is actually pretty far in advance because they can't print
Right.
the warrant until the
Well-
motions. So they close the,
They close
There's
and
a-
sign the warrant.
they close the warrant,
Yeah.
was it 30 days before?
35 days.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then the motion meeting is scheduled soon
Soon after.
thereafter.
Yeah.
I mean, the motion meeting, and then getting everything printed, writing up the yellow sheets and everything else.
Mhm.
But, I mean, I, rather than, and I wouldn't say one member of any of those committees can throw it out, because then it's crazy, you're not gonna have anything on it.
But again, you're not, that's gonna happen anyway.
Yeah, but that's-
If there's a member of the FinCom who opposes something on the consent agenda, they're gonna do it at town meeting.
But then they need one or two other people to second it.
If
But
we
so
do
I,
it that way.
but
Not if you follow what most of the towns we've heard from are doing.
well, but I think we could choose to have it be more than one person, right? Like,
Right.
we're not locked in by what other towns have
But
done.
let me make this guess. If a member of the FinCom says, I don't think this should be on consent agenda, whether it's 2, 3, 4, or 5, they'll
We
get
just take
those
it
Well,
votes.
fair enough, but I think you guys are anticipating, let's let that happen, right? I think, to Jerry's point, if there's a motion meeting where that group has to collectively decide what the motions are gonna be, let them collectively decide what's gonna be on the consent agenda. And if one of them's not happy about it and wants to raise their objection on the meeting floor, then let them do it. But they don't get to kill it there without anyone knowing.
I guess what drives me is, it seems to me there's a value to having as little controversy as possible at town meeting about the consent agenda. If we want it to have credibility, ideally, we read through it and everything's on
But
there. So
I-
putting on something that we know there's gonna be a dispute about.
But we don't,
is-
but you're assuming, right? Like, if it's gone to this motions meeting and that body as a whole has decided to put on the consent agenda, now maybe there is someone who's really gonna be opposed to it, let that group decide then whether they should risk the controversy. And I feel like we short circuit a lot of this if we basically, rather than talking about a philosophy, I'm listening to this, let's talk about a goal. Like, let's say to that group, the consent agenda is meant to streamline town meeting, to reduce the amount of time we spend talking about whether we put this out in the public or not, are non-controversial or annually renewed. Let's give the people who are doing this, right? Well, we're just a rules committee, an ad hoc rules committee meant to sort of think this through and offer guidance. Let the people who do this, let's make a clear goal for this. Let's tell them that we believe this is what a reasonable process is. For you guys, you the people who have to actually defend this, to bring forward a consent agenda that we're then going to put in front of the entire town meeting body and offer maybe only one or maybe 3 members of that body to object to. And I think we spend, not that I'm willing to do the work if we decide we need to do it, but I think if we create that framework, if we state the goal and come up with what we think is a reasonable process that is either transparent enough or has enough input from the people who this town have elected to do these things, have an input in, then I think we've created, and let that body decide how many things should we put forward, where do we think the controversy is. Because I agree, I mean, I don't think you guys are wrong that if we do this in small steps, we're likely to have a little more success. But maybe we could do this in a big step and actually have the same amount of success, right? I just think
Yeah, it's a tool.
yeah.
John?
We've all been to town meetings, quite a few of them. If you have a process where you know going in that there was less than unanimity among the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom on multiple items, and that you're going to require multiple town meeting members to sustain that objection to not discussing it, you can write the headline right now. The latest attempt by the elite to push things past and block any attempt to take things off. That's an
John, I
oversimplification,
don't think
but that's
you're being
exactly how it's
fair,
going to
because
be.
what Eric is talking about is, you're saying one person on any one of those committees can knock this out.
Yes.
And that's crazy.
But that's
No, it's
consensus.
not
That's
crazy.
what consent
They're
is.
an elected, they don't vote that way.
But that's what
If
consent
Ann
is.
Haley, who's sitting right there, 4-1, the FinCom approves it.
There's no
Yes, but
consent.
that's after discussion.
Right, there's
We're
no
talking
consent.
about voting on whether there's to be any
Right.
discussion. That's a whole different matter.
But the thing is that's not a final vote. That committee, that is not a final vote.
Well, we're talking about
It's a
articles
final
that
vote.
usually don't
It's-
have
Right,
discussion.
but the no,
We're not
if
talking
the-
about
if
articles
this-
that
if the
probably
no
will have
is,
discussion. We're talking about things that don't have discussion.
the effect of a single member saying no is the town committee debates it. It's not the end of it, it's not, it's
I'm
just,
sorry,
it just doesn't
I
just
didn't
come
realize
off.
we decided that it was
Well, no,
only one.
I'm just saying.
If you go that route,
If you
that's
go
what
that
it
route.
means.
Yeah, no,
You know,
so-
you're concerned that a single member can do something terrible. Well, the terrible thing they do is it gets decided by a full
No, I don't
town
think
meeting.
it's a question of terrible. It's just gonna make it less likely, right? Like if we have to get all that unanimous consensus in order to even get it on the consent agenda,
Then why are we even?
why
doing
are we
this?
even bothering?
But we need unanimous consent to get the consent agenda approved at town meeting.
No, we don't. We haven't decided that yet.
All right, we need close to a unanimous.
But that's a body of more than 100 as opposed
But
to
again,
12.
just as a practical, not as a theoretical matter, as a practical matter, I don't think it's realistic to say, if a FinCom member or Board of Selectmen member stands up at town meeting and says, I oppose this, that person will get 3 votes,
But
5
let's-
votes, whatever number we
Let's
want.
let that committee that's putting this, those same people are going to be in that room together deciding this. Let's let those people decide whether or not that one vote is enough to keep it off.
If Peter is correct, that we're trying to channel this toward things that are traditionally non-controversial and stick to that until we have established the acceptability and reasonableness of the process, that's one thing. But Eric, what I hear you saying is maximizing streamlining. Let's do the maximum amount of streamlining that the body will tolerate. And it doesn't matter what your intentions are or what the escape valves are for people, the way that will be played out. In fact, since this is being filmed, it may be in next week's paper, is going to be, they're trying to find a way to shut your voice off.
So maybe streamlining isn't the right word, but what I'm saying is there's a reason we're in here. There's a goal for the consent agenda, right? we all think it will make town meeting more efficient. Or we seem to think that, right? That was so if that is the goal, like if that's the whole reason we are even here, then let's say to this committee that can put, your goal is to make town meeting more efficient so that all these people who are putting all this time in it don't have to waste it. This is meant to serve, so whether streamlining is the right word or not, what I'm saying is we have elected officials who already have the role of putting together the motions. Let's charge them also with looking at those motions as a group, deciding which of them they think are worthy for the consent agenda. Let's not that just one of them then say yay or nay. Let them act as a body like they do for all the motions, because I suspect there are probably some.
Can I make a suggestion? Because I think we clearly have a difference of opinion, and people feel strongly about it. As I said, I'll be happy to take a shot at drafting a motion. I will draft a motion and I'll put two options in there. So the town meeting moderator will prepare a list. It will be reviewed by the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen. Either a majority of either board can take an item off there, or a single vote of either board can take an item off. And we can get a chance to think about it. When we have our next meeting, we'll have those two options and vote on which we're going to recommend.
Okay.
And what will your motion say about the number of town meeting members?
We haven't got there
We
yet.
haven't got
We're
there
going
yet.
one step at a time.
Mike, I think I need to clarify something about the motions, and I'm
Sure,
sorry,
yeah,
I did
no, no.
not intend to
No.
open my mouth here. But the motions committee, when the motions committee gets together, it is not members of all of the different
Right.
things. It's only one person from each board,
Right.
okay? Just wanted to make
Yeah,
sure
oh, I know,
everybody understood that.
Well, in which case then that one person, certainly, like, I suspect that one person's objection will carry the day then.
So, just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that everybody understood. It's not the whole group doesn't see all the motions or participate in that meeting.
Well, if that's the case, then I think very clearly the likelihood is
So-
that.
So when it gets recommended to the selectmen that it's only been one representative of the FinCom, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. I think people can go, but normally it is one person from the FinCom.
I think we would check, I think we should check that. I don't
Yeah,
know that
because
it's
I-
standard.
But what we're talking about is the Board of Selectmen and the
FinCom,
FinCom
right.
have the list from the town meeting moderator, and
Right.
either a majority or a single person can knock things off.
Yeah, and then we can
That's-
leave how they want to do it procedurally.
Right.
And when the FinCom gets together and they're looking at the budget and the line items, they take votes, do they not?
Yes,
And then that's presented to the selectmen, is it not?
yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Don't they agree on that? You agree, as a
Yes,
FinCom
yeah.
committee? Okay. So why then, if you were looking at that, could they not say, this is really not going to, this is exactly the way it's been for the last 10 years. When we give this to the selectmen, let's put on there, this is a non-controversial issue, I think you should look at it for the consent agenda.
That's
It makes sense
certainly
that
something
you're
they could
going
do.
over that, all of that,
Yeah, I
and
mean, that's-
whoever is presenting to the selectmen can present it and say, this is really non-controversial,
That's a-
nothing's changed.
That's a good suggestion.
Does not have to be
helpful to
FinCom.
everybody.
But I also don't think that needs.
We only go through money articles.
Correct, for yours,
So-
correct. But I mean, you know
Yes.
which ones have changed or have not changed or isn't gonna be controversial that year. So I think they can do it that way.
But I also don't think that needs to be in the rule, right?
No,
I mean, I think-
no,
Right.
no, it's
Right.
just,
And I
it's a
think-
good suggestion.
And I mean, I guess
That's a good procedure.
part of me feels like, can we just
Once in
say
a while.
that whoever is responsible for the motions, for putting forth the motions, that same group should put forth the consent agenda?
I guess my feeling just is you want this process to have credibility. And one of the ways it has credibility is if there's been a fair amount of responsible people in town have looked at it and they all agree. So that's to me and that makes it more likely than that because no matter what we do, a very small group of people, if they want to derail this, can. Now, the experience that we've all seen, and I've also talked to the town meeting moderators, that doesn't happen. And I think it doesn't happen usually because the process has credibility. People don't think you're trying to pull a fast one or sneak one by them.
But I'm confused as to why the process that gets us the motions would not be credible enough to get us the consent agenda.
Because as Ann said, the process that gets us the motion is one representative from each board.
Right, but they're there championing their.
Or more or less, sometimes, there's no
Yeah.
guarantee,
When there has been controversy in the past, it's generally been some town meeting member who is unhappy with what's being proposed to be done with the money in a department where the department really thinks it's a good idea. So the notion that the department will be the one to flag controversy, I think, flies in the face of history.
But then that town meeting member can raise their hand.
And if if you go with the less conservative approach, then you end up with, and now he's got to persuade several other people.
Well, so that's a totally different question, right? Like
It's not a totally
No,
different
it-
question, because both of the questions we're talking about is, how strongly do we believe that the early credibility and acceptability of our process depends upon extremely broad consensus by the time that stuff meets the town meeting members. And I think Mike described it in those terms. I also say that I would disagree with framing the idea that our goal is efficiency, full stop. Our goal is to see whether there are methods of efficiency that will improve the overall conduct of town meeting. But that doesn't mean that we're willing to sacrifice anything else, really, in the service of efficiency.
So-
We haven't reached that kind of consensus.
I don't feel like we are still involving our elected officials, the people who, like, the idea that the fact that the committee that the committee responsible for the budget for that department, which thinks this is a good idea, that's not enough consensus, that somehow one person objecting to that renders that whole process improper. Like, so I think,
Can I just suggest, though, I mean, because we want to move through things, and I think everybody's done a good job at laying out their positions. And my suggestion would be, let's
Take a
come
breath.
back next meeting.
Yeah.
We'll
Take a
have
breath.
the two options in writing, and we can take a vote. And
And-
we'll-
Yeah.
that make sense?
Not to open up the debate again, but just, Mike, just to clarify, what you're gonna be doing, we're not gonna dictate process. You basically is gonna be bump and
Yes.
bump, right?
Yeah.
And
This is
let's,
this who needs to check it off, and how they
Right.
check it off is their business.
bingo.
So-
And I don't mean to keep on either, but I hear you, and I understand what you're saying, and it's frustrating. But as town meeting members, they can sit there and say, I don't think this is right.
So the
I
next thing we're gonna move
understand.
to
I understand.
is,
It's frustrating.
yeah.
Yeah.
the next thing, which I think is less controversial.
Here's the test.
I just doomed myself.
Consent agenda.
Yeah, how many of us can object to that?
It depends.
Is
I
the
object to the word controversy.
I asked for that. The format of the consent agenda, which my suggestion would be, there be a kind of boilerplate explanation of the procedure, of the process, and the proponent of the motion prepare a brief explanation of what it's about and why it's appropriate for consent agenda. And it's just that simple. And that then be distributed with the town meeting materials. So that the yellow pages, you get whatever the gray
Oh, we don't get
pages or
yellow
the
pages for the-
or the red pages or whatever. What's
We
that?
don't- We don't get yellow pages for this annual, we just get them from the specials.
We can put them with the,
I mean, it had to be a special.
with the
And
binder.
We had to
Yeah,
put
with
an
the
addendum.
book.
Include it with the book.
Addendum, I
Make
guess.
it an
Yeah.
addendum to
Yeah.
the book, with the town meeting
Well,
material.
I think the consent agenda has to be, I would hope it would be available like 7 days in advance.
I was just gonna say.
But, but definitely have to be on the table before the start of the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, if
Oh,
it
yeah.
goes out with the book, it's.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, the book becomes the book might come from a mailing company. So you definitely, you can't always consider that because whoever does this might be mailing it to. Whoever print and then mail it, because they'll be given a list, mail it.
But as a practical matter, you can't make heads or tails of a consent agenda without the book.
Oh, yeah, well, but it probably would
I would
follow,
think.
would probably follow.
Yeah,
Well, the book's usually, has to be out 14 days in
yeah.
advance.
So my only suggestion is it should, whatever kind of town meeting is, it should go with the town meeting material.
Right,
Yeah, right.
because you'll be adding indefinite postponements and things such as that.
Right.
My one, I'm sorry.
You said, start with some language, boilerplate description of the format.
And procedure.
Certainly, and procedure, and I agree with that. And then something that goes with each item being proposed for the consent agenda. And I think you said something comes from the
A
proponent.
brief description from the proponent
Who's
of
the
the motion.
proponent?
The FinCom or the Board of Selectmen or whoever is
Yeah,
proposing the
whichever
motion.
Well,
Proposing the-
but suppose it's a school item.
That would be the
So,
school committee.
committee.
So would it be, if it's from general government, would it be the Board of Selectmen or would
Yeah.
it be the department?
No, it'd be the Board of
No,
Selectmen.
Board of
They're
Selectmen.
they're the proponent of the motion.
Well, can I just point out one thing? Article 4 here is on petition from the town treasurer.
And he would be the one.
Well, I mean, but basically what it is just let me do my job.
And I assume somebody would write it up for him one time, and it'd be the exact same
Oh,
thing
Yeah,
every
probably
year.
copy paste it every time.
Yeah.
All right, why do I feel confused? Aren't you, if you're going to have a consent agenda, have a list
Yes,
Yeah,
and present them all at once?
yes.
right.
Yeah, but
Alright,
he's saying
so
explain why
skipping
each
from
one
one-
is on the
Each
consent.
list, you're gonna explain
All
why
right, and you're
that's.
not gonna have
what-
one
what
person
that's
doing
about.
that, you're going to go to
Right.
individual.
Well,
One, for written materials.
So
Yeah,
written.
for the-
For written
Okay.
materials. Presumably what you
Okay.
would have,
I'm
and again,
confused.
we're getting deep into procedure now, but I think, Mike, what you're saying is there should be an explanation, the why, to the town meeting members when they get their materials on this is what's gonna be on the consent agenda
Yeah.
and item by item, why. it
You know, the
belongs.
banking thing every
Right.
year. Dave has to
Got it.
spend some time explaining why we have to have this banking motion.
Right.
We just have 2-3 sentences that explain what this means, and that's why it's on the consent agenda.
I think we need to keep in mind too, that some of this is to shorten
Yes.
town meeting.
Well,
this is just something you're
Yeah,
gonna
no,
read.
at town meeting, I mean, we can,
Yeah.
I know it's a little more controversial than I thought, but if we move now to town meeting procedure, what's gonna happen at town meeting, then he's not reading that material at all.
Correct.
He's going to the consent agenda, and he's reading down the list, and he's giving an opportunity for objections. And of course, the question becomes, how many objections does it take? Yes, John?
I think we will want to spend more time thinking about who's the proponent. I'm not convinced that that will be as self-evident in all cases. I think you can easily end up with an item where a department head, the Board of Selectmen, and the FinCom all could legitimately claim to be the proponent. They've all signed off on the idea that it goes
What the
on the
false is
consent
selectmen?
agenda.
The selectmen are the top.
It's on the motion
top
of somebody.
authority.
It's on the motion.
It's on the motion of
As
someone.
proposed by
Yeah.
the selectmen,
I mean,
as
it's-
proposed by the FinCom.
But can I make a
So
suggestion?
that's how you make the identification.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, or alternatively, right, we're gonna have some body decide what's on the consent agenda. Clearly, they're going to have used some sort of criteria for that, right? So rather than an explanation for each, could they conceivably group them, right? The following are included because they are annual authorizations approved, boom.
That would be their discretion.
Yeah, well, so I'm just, so rather than prescribing to them, I think it would be,
No, my only thing is, I don't think we want to give any one person the responsibility of writing this document. I think it's fair to say, whosever motion this is, ought to do the support. And it may very well be the town manager takes it over for everyone and does the, I don't know.
I kind of feel like it's whoever's putting, whatever group is ultimately responsible for putting that as a group, they should explain, and they can just divide amongst themselves who they think is
I agree,
appropriate, but.
and not our job to tell them how to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically saying, doesn't matter who, it's that there would be an explanation
Of
behind
some
the
sort
why.
of,
Right.
yeah.
The why.
Yeah.
So, we're at town meeting, somebody objects, how many people have to object for it to be knocked off the
I
consent
suggest
agenda?
5.
I disagree. So for me, I'm newly elected this year. I don't know anyone else in town meeting. I've had no opportunity to explain why I want to hold the thing. I'm just alone by myself saying, wait, I actually have an important thing about that thing. But there's no opportunity to discuss it, and then it gets
I
passed.
thought
So
that
are
you
you
as a
voting
new
for
town meeting
one?
member had if I looked at it quickly, I would give you your second opinion. I would never leave you standing
I
there
thought we
alone.
were starting to find out what people are saying, not defending their different positions.
Well, I think we're doing both, I think we're just discussing.
Yeah,
Were you coming out for one?
I think you just got.
I'm coming out for one.
I mean, one thing procedurally, I think, is for this to work at all, you can't debate you know, when the one person holds their hands up. So what you'll know is one person objects. You really won't know.
But I will have had no opportunity to
You
do
won't
any
know why,
caucusing or anything.
What
You'll
their
just-
rationale is.
But,
Because if you let them debate it, then you've lost.
Right.
Can I
Yeah.
go ahead.
just say something? Yeah, I understand how one would happen, but I think what we're missing the point here, because we haven't seen it physically yet, is when we get the consent agenda, we have the article, we have the article as it's written, and probably should have in plain English what this article's about. So if you're reading this, then you'll understand, okay, this is to authorize the treasurer to borrow money. In plain English, instead of chapter 44, section 4, and then you get lost in all that stuff. You just get that and saying, you know, okay, we have to authorize the treasurer to do his job. That's basically it. And then the next one, you know, this and that. Where you get, there should be the article, but also a plain English and, you know, explanation. One sentence would be,
Yeah, I mean,
would
that's
be
the
great.
material we were talking
Right,
about.
and as far as that goes, so that's the material you're getting. It's not like, okay, I don't understand, but we also have the primer for people that at first, you know, haven't been through town meeting. You go through that, and they can explain what the consent agenda is and what's going to be on it. So that'd be part of the orientation too for new town meeting members. So I mean, you're feeling you're lost in the first meeting. You know, it. Yes and no. I mean, it's maybe not. You have the right to ask and question anything, but do you feel comfortable getting up and say, okay, what's this? If someone has already explained it to you earlier, I mean, you know,
After all is said and done, and they've done all those things,
yeah.
does it take one? Does it take five? Does it take three?
I mean, mine is 5. I mean, I don't want one person
Where are you
torpedoing.
on this?
Right, but we'll be,
She's still new.
I think I agree with 1. Yeah. Because you're not, because, as you said, you don't get the opportunity at that time to question why it's on there, and for other people like myself that don't know anybody, I think one person questioning it should be enough to set it aside.
Now, with what Peter just said, would that help? I mean, he was saying as far as the explanation, and it would be like,
I think the explanation would help because I think some of them can be confusing. Yeah.
I would
That would
vote for
help you.
1, and my reason is different. I don't think most of the people saying hold are going to be people with questions. They're going to be people with objections. And it may be that the more material you provide them, the clearer it is to them that there's something to object to. So if we then reach that point, they haven't had a chance to talk to anybody else at that point. And so I think that is going to be poorly received, and that's why I say 1.
Can I?
Jerry, what do you want?
I'm team 5, because I still think that if we do this right, materials go out beforehand, town meeting members read their materials. If they do have questions, they can pick, you know, you can call town official. Tony is like, he'll talk to anybody, anytime, anywhere,
Or add.
for hours.
hours.
Yeah.
And I am on
Yeah.
video.
And you're also on the
saying that.
board on NCM too.
So I just think that you might, you know, not that I want to question any of our town meeting members, because I think everybody is there because they want to be there, but you could have just one person who just keeps raising their hand and raising their hand.
just because they don't like consent agenda.
But conversely, you can also have a group bully the
Absolutely.
singles out.
No, I totally, that's,
I mean, one thought I guess that I had, I think I am on team 1. You know, there is, it happens not infrequently at town meeting that one person does stand up on something that everybody thinks is just routine, and it turns out, in the end, they're right. I mean, that does happen, and it's one thing, you know, if somebody stands up during a general debate and they're crazy, then they're crazy, and that's nothing happens. But if that person's sitting there on one of these items that we all think is nothing, and it turns out there's something there, and you know, and as I said, there's no debate. All you know is somebody raised their hand, and then the question is, any other town meeting members join? You don't know who raised their hand. You don't know why they're raising their hand. I don't.
Well,
But aren't you defeating, I mean, I guess with everything that we talked about happening before, it even comes to the point where it would be in consent agenda.
But the other thing is, most towns have one person, and most towns have had good luck with consent agendas. I mean, I think we're all worried about, and I understand why, you know, the difficult, stubborn person who's just causing problems. But, you know, you can almost say that's like the price you gotta pay.
Well, how about a compromise?
At 3, I was just gonna say that.
What
2.5?
Eric, you're the only one who hasn't voted.
They get a half person there someplace.
So I'm on team more than one, because I do worry about the person who doesn't necessarily have an objection but has an agenda,
Yeah.
right? And I think if we go out with one, we're never going to get. I think it's going to be harder to move from 1 to 5 if we discover, because that looks like, all right, we want to silence the people. I think if we go out originally with say 3, and I think also, you know, I hear what you're saying. But getting 2 other
It's my
people.
ability to lobby.
Yeah, I mean,
It
you talk
does.
to people on either side of you, right? Hey, look, I have an issue, right? I mean,
Yeah,
like
Most
that.
town meeting members are really,
Yeah.
I mean,
really
they're-
good, they're
they're
really
really-
attuned, especially to new people. There's something on.
And if our,
It's
and I mean, I
really
think that, and I hear what you're saying, Mike, that there have been the things that we think are non-controversial that someone raises an objection to, although I'm trying to remember one that didn't end up getting passed in the end after,
45 minutes.
yeah, after 45 minutes of discussion, so I'm not sure it's, you know,
That does happen.
so I do think, I mean, I'm not sure that the anonymous one, you clearly, I think you should have to identify yourself as the person asking for the hold. I don't think it should be something that you can just raise your hand
Whatever,
and,
right? You have to
Yeah.
identify
Yeah.
yourself anyway.
so, you know,
Can I throw out one thing here that kind of bothers me, is the word hold. I would rather say keep open for discussion than say hold, because I just, you know, hold is such a nebulous term to me, and I just don't think it exactly addresses what needs to be said. I think someone should just say, keep open, or keep open for discussion, and then that, instead of this hold, I do not like the word hold
How
at
about
all.
remove from the list?
yeah.
Well, just, yeah, well,
No,
just say, keep open. And that's the action you want. You want to keep that open for discussion. That's what you want. Not hold or remove or anything like that. Just keep open for discussion and just let it ride at that. I
Yeah,
think
sure.
that's
Sure.
more appropriate than to say hold, because
I don't
you know,
like the
half the
word.
people are like, what did you say, hold? You know, and nobody, it's either a positive action or a negative action. To me, it's just a nebulous word. It has nothing.
I think that's fair. I think hold could be confusing.
Yeah, I just think keep open and leave it at that, you know?
I agree with Peter that hold is not a great word. But worse than that to me would be to use a multi-word phrase. Because
Well, I think
this thing starts slowing down a lot. I would think keep by itself could be.
Keeps
but-
confusing. Keep on the list or
Or could
keep
we,
off the list.
could we just ask, could the moderator just saying, is anyone opposed to this? And you just say, I am.
Well, it's not
Right.
opposition, it's discussion. Do you want the opportunity
No,
to
no, no.
lobby?
Are you opposed to this being on the consent agenda?
How about that word you used, discuss?
Right, discuss is
Discuss.
short.
Anybody want
Yeah,
to
you can-
discuss?
yeah.
Anybody favor discussion?
But you notice how
It's I am.
every time we hit an issue, it gets framed one way with one set of words and one way with another set of words. Are you putting the burden on the person who wants to discuss it, or the burden on the people who don't? And I think if you put the burden on the people who don't who want to discuss things, that's gonna look like David and Goliath. But I would also say, to summarize the voting, it was 4-4. 4 for one, 4 for more than one, probably
Oh,
5.
Sarah.
I don't consider 3 a compromise. I might be talked into 2, because I think going from 1 to 2 knocks out most of the trolls. But I would vote against anything that was more than 2.
So we all have to lobby Sarah before the next meeting.
And I vote against one.
Yeah.
But I'm puzzled by your comment about putting the burden on those who want to discuss or those who don't want to discuss, because it seems to me that the entire purpose of a consent agenda is to put the burden on those who want to discuss.
No, I disagree with that entirely. I
I do
do
too.
not.
Isn't that the whole point? Isn't the
No.
consent agenda to remove
No,
it from
no,
discussion?
No, the point is to find those motions that nobody's interested in
Yeah,
discussing.
Right, that's the exact, like, all the people who aren't interested in them because they don't want to discuss them.
No.
As
Because
opposed
they
All the
typically don't
people,
get
all the
discussed.
motions that nobody is interested in.
Right.
But we can't know
discussing.
that for certain.
My
That's
point-
why we
But
go
that's-
through this process.
Right, but that's why this consent agenda is set up that way, right? We talk about all the things that we think no one wants to discuss. The only way to get it removed is if you say you want to discuss it. So by its nature, a consent agenda puts the burden on the person who wants to discuss as opposed to the people who don't want to, because the process has assumed or determined, I guess I'll use determined rather than assumed, that these are the motions that no one wants to discuss. So where does the burden lie?
I don't think that, I disagree on several levels with what you just said. On one level, if we are going with a process that requires multiple objections by the elite who putting the thing together, then you can't say that we have screened it down to only those things that nobody could object to, because we're willing to put things on the consent agenda draft that some people have objected to. Once you get to this, the goal is, as Mike has said and others have said, it's to try to find efficiencies that arise naturally from the fact that nobody wants to discuss these things. No one is going to object. It's not to override minimal objection and keep it from building momentum. It's just something much more modest.
But I am baffled as to how a process by which we've tried to determine those things that no one wants to discuss puts the burden on the people who don't want to discuss it.
We don't have the process you just described. So it's, your sequence of questions is moot.
But I'm
Gene, you want to take a shot?
Yeah, I don't feel, say the moderator's salary was on that. I don't feel that it's a burden either way. If I want to discuss the moderator's salary, I don't look at that as a burden on me. I don't. And I don't look at it as a burden on the people that put that on the agenda. It's just an article that went on that never changes because he gets about $50, you know, so it's not, I don't think that's really a burden. I think it's just the term that's being misused. So
But
it's
Gene,
not, you know,
I think
not a big issue.
You're illustrating the other side of the argument by your own personal characteristics.
Right, but I don't think it's an argument.
You
I
are
think-
experienced,
Right.
you are knowledgeable,
Right.
you are confident. Many of the town meeting members are not.
Right,
Those are the ones that we're worried about pushing to the
right. I
side.
guess the term, I take the term, I don't think that it is that big an issue.
Can I make this
A
suggestion?
burden is what I'm
So,
trying to say.
so again, I'm going to try to take a shot at drafting something,
Two.
and I will include 3 options, 1, 3, and 5.
I don't like them, no.
Well, and also just because someone says they want to keep something open for discussion doesn't mean when the time comes, they have to be the one to discuss anything.
Sure.
If
So.
you really wanted to stick it to him, it says you're the first one to say
Yeah.
on the motion.
Yeah.
Nobody would
That's a
ask
burden.
Yeah.
So,
That's the burden.
And that'd be a waste of our dick.
so hopefully at the next meeting, we'll have a full quorum. Certainly, everybody's motivated to show up the next time.
In terms of your 3 options, is there anybody who voted for 1 who would go up to 3?
I'm not going to rule
I
that
think
out.
You would.
I
See, I
mean,
would
2,
make
I'd
it-
talk about 2 maybe.
I would make it
I
1,
think
2, and
that's-
5.
I think
Or
it's-
1, 2, 3, and
Like,
5.
yeah, well, I like the 2 option.
Why don't we do this? I'll put
Right.
1 and 5. If neither of those carry a majority, we'll then have to come to a
What if it's a
consensus.
5-4 majority?
Then
That's a
the 4
majority.
loses and
That's
the
a
5
majority.
wins.
Yeah. 1,
5
2,
you
1, 3,
win,
and
4
5.
you lose.
1, 2, and a half, no.
You know, and if
Right,
somebody wants to
so-
say vote against 5 because we should do 3, that's
So we're gonna
fine.
go back to the people who created this and say, we voted 5-4 for this version of consent agenda. That's not getting us off to a very good consensus start.
I think we need to start somewhere. And so my suggestion is, we'll come in with 2 options. We understand that the extreme options, and we'll have a discussion. And if we can come to some agreement that's better than 5-4, great. If there are 5 people who are absolutely adamant on one end, and 4 people who are absolutely adamant on the other end, that's the nature of a committee.
And you
sometimes
have
that
two
happens.
people, you had said one, and she had said one, and now you would be willing to go with more than one, so you're already getting
I'm not
close
sure
to
of
it.
that.
I
I'm
would
just
go
saying
to
I'm not
two.
shutting
I don't
the door,
think I would
but
go to
I-
three. Yeah.
I would
Put it
continue
in
to lobby
perspective.
hard for one, I just haven't
What's
pressed
that?
it because I don't want us to dwell on the same topic all night.
Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, put in perspective.
Because like
I
we've
mean,
heard a lot
basically,
about
if-
what the worst that happens if someone does a hold, but we haven't considered thoroughly the worst that happens if we have people running the system that we don't like. We currently like who's running it apparently, and we're confident in their abilities. Think through the scenario of what happens when we don't like who's there and they're not competent and you're pushing things through. What is the worst consequence of that version, and what's the worst consequence of one person being a troll?
I think the consequences of that are far bigger than the consent agenda at that point.
Correct.
Right? That means we have a town
That's- then we
government that we
have a
don't trust.
really
I
big
think, I
problem.
don't think that necessarily is as positive in
Okay,
terms of.
can I suggest we're
this,
going
but-
off,
Yeah.
I mean, I think your point is, but I think to go to the more general question, what we do with a bad government is.
I don't think the moderator would put something on it's that controversial that would cause,
So,
Yeah,
so,
hopefully that
so,
wouldn't get on
so
in
my
the first
suggestion
place,
is,
yeah.
I'll come next time and I'll get it to you ahead of time with a multiple choice.
Yeah, we'll
And
end up
John, let me think about whether
multi-voting and
multiple
we'll-
choice should be 3 or 2 or 5.
Yeah, I don't think we need to be as rigid about our motions here as we would be
No,
on town meeting.
No,
right?
but I think we just, we want to get options out so we can talk about something.
Absolutely.
We've had good general discussions. I think everybody's got a sense of what people feel like. So, if you don't mind, I just want to take things a little out of order, which is move to, before we talk about non-rule recommendations, move to any additional proposed changes to the rules. And one that we
so we're
talked-
off consent agenda now.
Yes.
Okay.
One that we talked about at the last meeting that I raised is registered speakers. And as it turns out, there is no rule about registered speakers at all. It's just something that's been accepted as practice. But when I went and looked at the rules and said, all right, now which rule am I fiddling around with here? There wasn't any rule. And I talked to Dave, and Dave agreed that that was the case, and Dave agreed that there probably should be a rule to set out the procedure.
No, my feeling is that it's talking about moving the question, a registered speaker moving to question is more what the procedure is. There's no written procedure for a registered speaker to move to question.
Right, but there's no procedure at all for registered speakers. It's just something that's evolved. It's not in the rules.
Well, you had to be recognized by the moderator if, you know, well, if we need to put it in writing, we can put it in writing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the
I
only,
think
that's,
that's
I don't think it's
Yeah.
controversial, but it
Right.
just, it evolved over the years, and
Right,
I, as I
it's a
said, I
practice
talked to
rather
Dave,
than
and
a
he
rule.
agrees it'd be a better thing to have something in writing. So, I did something, I got some suggestions from Dave. This is a proposed motion that I would suggest, and really the only, well, nothing, not, this, I don't think changes anything with the procedure. This formalizes in the last sentence, no registered speaker shall be permitted to move the question while speaking as a registered speaker. And other than that, it allows anybody to register with the moderator before the beginning of the session where the item gets taken up. Those speakers speak in the order that they register.
The one thing I don't see here, Mike, is, and again, it's a practice, I think, is that we won't recognize any non-registered, that the registered speakers get recognized first. And-
Yeah, well, after recognizing the moving party and the proponent, the moderator shall recognize the registered speakers in the order in which they register.
And again, what you're basically saying, but de facto, is if no registered speaker can move for the question, then you wouldn't have the question moved before all the registered speakers have spoken.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's the
Yeah.
thing you worry about. Yeah.
All this time, I thought it was a rule.
So did I. I agree. Yes, sir.
Great.
John.
A couple questions. So we are allowing an unregistered speaker to move the question at the end of their speech.
Oh,
there's-
no.
There's another rule that says you can't
There's
do that.
another rule that says you
Yeah,
can't.
there's another rule that says you
Then do you need, this sentence here?
No, because this stops somebody from being recognized as a registered speaker and standing up and saying, I move the question.
So is Rule 6 about, what is,
Yeah, Rule 6 is about,
is Rule 6 about a speaker, recognized speaker?
No member speaking on an issue may close by making a motion to move the question.
That's right,
Okay,
so that's 6.
That's
That
6.
certainly addresses my first question. My other question is, and my memory is uncertain here, are registered speakers given more time?
No,
Because I was under the impression that they were.
no.
Well, isn't anybody's 5 minutes? 5 minutes is
For everybody?
anybody, unless
Yeah.
granted an extension.
I think Dave has on occasion acknowledged a registered speaker and said, you asked me if you could
Yes.
have an extension of
Yeah,
time.
that happens a lot.
Before they get
That's
into the
like
end.
pre-approval.
Yeah,
Yes.
that happens a lot, but other than that, it's the same.
My only comment would be, given what you just read as Rule 6, I would rather add this at the beginning.
Well, no, I just read the
Oh,
last.
okay, I'm sorry,
I just read the
oh,
last
okay, oh, I
sentence.
apologize, I
This
apologize.
is
He's
6A.
going by,
Yeah.
he's going by
Yeah.
this.
Okay.
And he's
Yeah.
adding to
Gotcha.
it.
Yeah.
Kinda
Six
divided. Gotcha.
discusses all of the rules
I see, I'm
of
sorry.
debate, so.
Is it written that it has to be 5 minutes, can be 3? Depending on the time of the meeting?
No, 2.5.
Oh, no. Put that half.
So, any further discussion on this? And I guess the other question is, do people want to vote on it now, or do you want to think about it?
I already thought it was, so I'm ready to vote on it.
Yeah,
I
I'm
think-
comfortable, I think you've just memorialized what has already been happening.
Does anyone want to make a motion?
Motion to accept as Mike has written.
And
Second.
second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
So this will be a recommendation we make.
Yes.
Yeah.
The second one, which is again, just it's kind of the odds and ends that, this is kind of a funny one in some ways. Dave has always felt uncomfortable about the fact that the rules say he's supposed to select a rules committee every year. And he never has. And there aren't people who want to go through all this fun every summer, as surprising as that is. I talked to him about it, and his suggestion, which made sense to me, so I'm proposing it, is that the rule be changed to say
Every 5 minutes.
every 5 years unless the moderator or a majority town meeting wants it sooner. Because that's just, it's more realistic that that would happen, and it's more likely that if it's every 5 years, the moderator will actually make the effort to, and the fact that we're the first one that I can remember. I don't know, Gene, you ever remember any,
No, I know, when I
And-
looked it up, I went,
Yeah.
whoops.
and we're not coming up with a huge amount of things that need to be changed, so it seemed to me to make sense.
John, do you want-
Yeah. Do we want to vote on this now?
Yeah?
All right, I'm moved to approve the
Second it.
All right.
change to,
Any further debate,
As
discussion?
written.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Jerry, you moved.
I second it.
Peter seconded. All those in favor?
Every
Aye.
Friday.
Opposed? All right. The third one that I don't have a motion on, I'll let Jerry speak to. Jerry left me a message I didn't get a chance to get back to, which was interesting on the issue of electronic voting. And why don't you just tell people what you think of it?
so this is something that I've kind of been thinking about, and it's also something that is, some towns have done it with great success. Brookline is a great example of that. It's still evolving in the Commonwealth, but if we talk about efficiency, if we talk about the things that take up time during town meeting, and also, quite frankly, the rigor of some of the counts that are taken on votes where it really needs to be exact and not we're just going to say it's 100 to 1 or something like that. The nature of electronic voting now, which is reasonably, it's inexpensive. You can either lease the equipment, you can buy the equipment, or you can also, there's apps now on phones where it's very conducive for us in Norwood, because when you get your badge, which is something, and you can get your clicker, your device, there's full transparency because you will know who voted. It would go up on the screen. And again, in the conversations with some former town moderators and some other, some current town moderators, and full candor, I did talk to Tony a little bit about it just to get his opinion on it. I just think it really would, this would be something that would save us time, number one. And number two, the exactness of the real, kind of the rigor around our actual votes and what the real count is would be true rather than a kind of sometimes back of the napkin type of
Is there an issue of public vote? I mean, now people vote publicly, and you know, we're elected representatives, and so.
You will be, that's why I'm saying,
Although
your
there is
name,
technically a
it
secret
actually will
vote
say
option.
displays right on
Okay.
the, so we'll see a display in front of us. So I'm bringing it up as something that I think would be a good idea for us to pursue. We obviously need to do some more research on it. I'm more than willing to do that. If some folks want to come along and talk to a couple of town moderators and also talk to the vendors about what this might entail, but I just think it could be a game changer for a town meeting as far as what we're trying to accomplish.
It's a good idea.
It'd be
Jerry,
good for accessibility.
I'm
Can't
wondering
shame
if
her.
you're thinking of, I know of at least two different types of electronic voting. The kind the US Senate uses where each person goes up to the front and logs in a vote. And the other is the way the Masked Singer works on TV, where everybody's got a little device and you punch in.
Yeah, in all the towns in the Commonwealth that are utilizing it now, everybody has an individual device.
We're more reality TV type.
Yeah, so we're more like the singer.
Can we have a masked selectman then?
I mean, I guess one
Mass voters.
thought I have is, you know, from a rules committee, I'm not sure if it would be enough for us to simply propose a rule that says electronic voting would be a lot permissible. Because the buying of the equipment and the dealing with the vendors and contracting is a town job. It's not, and the decision to spend that money is not our decision.
But couldn't we not make a recommendation?
Sure.
And I do think that would be kind of a cool thing for us to do, to make that recommendation. It may be a little, you know, I don't think that there could be a rule around it initially, because again, but I think if we, with this committee, with our purview and with the folks that we have on it, it gives the town manager, the opportunity to then go pursue it, and obviously.
As somebody who's done a lot of those counts, I know how deadly that time is when everybody just sits there for 10 minutes.
I know.
Just
Peter, you've done a lot of
I've
them
done
too.
a few,
Yeah.
So I,
Yeah.
Do
Sit
you
behind
happen
Kevin
to know
Conley,
any
that's
towns
right.
that-
Yeah, Brookline is using it, and actually the town moderator there is a guy named Sandy Gaspy, who is like, apparently, he conducts town meeting like a symphony, literally. I mean, I was like listening to this, and everyone that I've spoken to has basically said Brookline is the model behind the electronic voting. There are a number of towns on the Cape are using it. It's taking on, basically, for all the reasons that we're talking about now, especially with elected town.
I've seen, when I was going through compiling the data for the different, like, lookalike towns, I ran across it there too, and they had pretty thorough, like, instructions in their rules about this is what this is, we have this kind of voting, we have secret voting, and we have device voting, the device will be passed out at this time, you know, everybody who gets, and it has a whole description of how they use it. So there are definitely places using it.
To follow up what Jerry is saying, I think what we should do is make a recommendation to the selectmen to put it on the warrant for the next, and if one of the future meetings, to first see what the appetite is for it, and then to authorize the pursuit of investigating before we start, you know, I mean, everybody's gonna, well, the first thing everybody wants to know is how much it's gonna cost. You probably have to get some idea of an approximation of how much it would
About
cost per device.
$10,000 to lease
For how many devices, right?
for.
300?
no,
As an
yeah.
annual number?
Yeah,
An annual number or a
10K.
first-time appropriation? And how long does that, I mean, we
Yeah, I
need
mean,
more details, and I know,
yeah,
obviously.
yeah. I mean, it would be, I could see it as being, could be an article at the annual, I don't, that basically appropriating money.
Right.
for-
Oh, yeah, we'll need
Town
to.
meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like, okay, get an idea of ballpark, how much it's gonna cost, and then put it out, ask town meeting, what do you think? And if you think it's worthwhile for us to pursue, and we'll come back at a future meeting with the actual cost of, because you have to, if you're gonna award anything, it's gotta be within 60 days of when you open the bid and all that type of stuff, so your timing of when you're gonna do this and all that. But my feeling is, sure, let's make a recommendation, get a ballpark figure of what, approximately what it's gonna cost, and what's the feeling of the body? And then, is it worth pursuing then? And say, okay, come back if we do it in a fall special, come back in the annual with how much it's gonna cost, and an appropriation motion for
I mean,
it.
as we talked, I think at the first meeting, we can make formal proposals for changes to rules, and we can also make recommendations, just along with you said. So we could make a recommendation that the Board of Selectmen explore.
To put it on the warrant for discussion. I mean, I think it needs to go to the body and let them, obviously, the first question always is, how much is it gonna cost? Because nobody's gonna be in favor of it. If nobody's gonna, nobody in town meeting is comfortable with blank checks.
Yeah.
And we're not gonna give them a blank check, we're gonna give them an idea, how much, we need, if it's 250 people would be a full town meeting, we'd probably have to have 300 devices, because you never know if one's gonna malfunction and stuff like that, but.
Peter, let me just, and Gina, I think, our job is to make the recommendation, if we
Yep.
believe it should be, and then leave it to the town. It's just like, we got the new electronic voting machines. We didn't debate that at the town meeting floor, whether we should, it came up as an appropriation.
Yeah.
So, basically, if we recommend it, kick it to the town to choose, the town manager to pursue. My guess is he's going to, based on the conversation I had with him. And then it becomes a money article around the appropriation for not, debating whether we, the
Well-
debate is the money article, basically.
Can I just respond to that? I agree, but the thing about it is, it's kind of like how this consent decree came up. It's kind of like boom, last minute. The thing about it is we've been around town enough to know that the more you prepare, the better likelihood for success. So I mean, I think if we put it out there and then say we're coming back, and not say, okay, you're gonna decide tonight if we're doing this or not doing this, I would think giving them a chance to bite at the apple here and get the feeling of what they're saying, and then say, is it worthwhile us pursuing? And then come back with the appropriation at the annual or the spring special or something like that. I just think if you tee it up a little bit more, I think you have better success at it. I just think if we just come up and say, okay, let's vote on it today, and,
Well, no, you're not going to be because it would be in our report, and I don't know what the procedure is, but presumably, everything that we're recommending here or voted on is going to be part of a report that will be given, I'm
Report
guessing.
on it at the
Right.
next special, yeah.
Or it's gonna be on NCM for the next.
Well, it's going to be live on, not so live, on
Sure.
NC, and then it will show up as money work.
It sounds like the can is already being kicked down the road. You've talked to Tony.
I have.
And if he,
He loved the idea.
absolutely, I'm sure that he will look into it. But I thought when you started to say that you were looking at some help to get a little bit more information on it, were you?
I was, but if everybody is comfortable, I mean, the question is, we need more comfort, more information in order for us to be comfortable recommending it as part of our report. I would be looking for
I
help.
can't do anything right now to help you, but I can in about a month, because I'm really not here enough. But I would be happy to help,
But
whatever you want.
Well, okay, maybe back off what I was saying, but kind of think ahead and thought about, we're gonna make a report at the special. We make a report and a recommendation at the special, but it doesn't get appropriated or voted on till the annual, so that's what I'm saying as far as keying it up.
Yeah.
So, you know, this isn't like, everybody's got like 4 to 6 months to think about it, and then, you know, as far as that goes, and if we got this, we're the only 9 people that think it's a good idea, it dies. But if it's got reasonable, you know, like everybody will be like, how much it's gonna cost, and you know, that'll be like 3/4 of the people will hold back because they don't know what's gonna cost, they don't want to appropriate a blank check, and, you know, nobody can blame them. So I think if we put it in the report, make that recommendation in the report, I'm gonna make motion, I'll second it. As far as that goes.
One thing is I like Peter's idea of using the special town meeting not just to report on this, but to test the general interest and receptiveness from the body. Since we can't vote on the money till next spring anyway, it seems like an opportunity to get people thinking about it and also get a sense of the temper of the body. The other thing I wanted to mention though, and this is a bit further off, is if we're talking about electronic voting, what about proxy voting and mail voting?
I'm not crossing that bridge tonight.
Yeah, no.
Not tonight, but I'm saying, these are things which have been used with increasing frequency in standards writing national organizations to cope with the increasing difficulty in getting a quorum. Well, that's not too far from what we've been a few times. So I think it'd be worthwhile to have somebody talking about that and seeing what comfort there might be.
I don't know, given the fact
I
that we're
don't have a
taking
warm
incremental
feeling in my
steps on the
belly about
consent
that.
agenda, I don't think
I'll
it's
just,
proxies
I'll
with a
just
10-foot
roll it back
pole.
to the motion we just passed, to recommend every 5 years. I think in 5 years, that'll be a great motion.
All right, so let me
All
go
right,
back to
if-
the
yeah, if
electronic.
you could, that would be
I'm willing
great.
to make the
That would
motion
be-
I'll
that
second
we
it.
recommend town pursuing
Although
electronic
I'm-
voting.
Make a recommendation during our report
Yep.
at town meeting at the special.
Can I just ask, Jerry, when you say 10,000, is that a ballpark? I mean, how real a number is it?
It's a good back of the napkin ballpark.
Can I just suggest that and I hate to ask anyone to, everybody's doing enough as it is, but could you just see if you can get a little more meat on that
Yeah,
bone?
you know what? I can, Tony was like, just give me the word and I will hook you up with a couple of vendors.
So then when we vote on it, we're voting,
Right.
with
Vendor A said this.
I was gonna
vendor
say,
B
I've
said
seen the
that.
one where you don't even need to download an app, you can just go to a website and do it from there and they can pull up
they have
the.
those.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I've seen a
and that
lot
might
of-
be more
a
cost
lot-
effective or, yeah.
Where I saw it was last summer, it was in Las Vegas, and it's a long story, but we ended up at Penn and Teller's TV show.
Nice.
And
Fool
in the
us?
audience of his TV show, Fool Us, they have the audience vote on who they like best and and they gave you a little gadget. You just pressed and,
The ones I've
it's good enough for
almost
Penn and
all
Teller.
It's
All right.
good enough, done.
And the
Yeah.
mass singer.
Yeah, and the Masked Singer, right. Okay,
You give a motion.
what's that?
You give a motion. You
Uh,
give a vote on it.
Was that motion seconded?
Yes,
Yes.
I did.
Could we hear the motion again?
So make a recommendation at special town meeting regarding purchasing devices for electronic
No,
voting.
take purchase, pursue,
Facility,
pursue.
yeah.
Say it again, the way you want it written down.
that the committee would recommend as part of their report at special town meeting that the town pursue electronic voting.
And I don't know if this is in order, but can I make a motion that we table that until the next meeting?
That's what I
That's
just
fine.
said.
Yes,
For-
that-
Yeah.
I'm
Jerry?
happy to withdraw it.
Okay.
Yeah, I just think, to Mike's earlier point, let's make that motion after we have a little more meat on the bones, because then I think it seems like we're
Happy to-
actually
Yeah.
doing it thoughtfully and not.
I agree.
Jeez, meat on the bone.
I may be able to outsource
We
some
can
of
get
my
research
research.
and say it tonight.
Yeah, my town manager,
Yeah.
yeah.
So any other proposed changes to town meeting rules?
I did get a note from Sarah Quinn about Saturday,
Oh,
a
yeah.
meeting on Saturday.
Ouch.
I don't know if that one came up last time.
She
I think
mentioned
it was
it
briefly
briefly.
Yeah, we
mentioned,
kinda
yeah,
mentioned it in
yeah,
passing.
yeah.
I haven't
I
heard
remember
anything
that.
about that.
Yeah.
What is it? Who's meeting?
Have town meeting on Saturday so
Oh.
that
Just people would be more, you know, alert and awake and,
Yeah.
I remember when my
Grumpy
kids were
'cause it's
young,
their
I
day
was
off.
not more alert and awake on Saturdays.
I know, it's a bit, yeah.
My feeling
Go.
about, and, you know, anybody with kids, from the days April school vacation ended to the day school ended, there was no time for anything else, you know, and we've got the special in May. I mean, that's the annual in May. I just think, you know, not at this time. 5 years from now, I guess would be a good time.
I mean, I think as a technical matter, the timing of,
It's in there, but you could change that.
yeah, you're right, it is, the
Yeah.
second Monday in May of each year. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
That's when the annual takes place, yeah.
Yeah.
And then one question I had about it was when we say Saturdays, because currently if we have to go into multiple nights for like kind of, you know, Monday, Thursday, would it be Saturday, Monday, Thursday? Or would it be Saturday to Saturday?
I mean, I just
Can't
feel,
leave
I just
until
feel like
you're
an
done.
an awful lot of people, especially everybody with kids is busy on Saturday. Whether
Yeah,
it's
soccer, baseball.
soccer or dance or
Baseball, dance.
baseball, whatever, I mean, it's just,
Well, plus if you've worked all week, Saturday and Sunday, it's like,
Catch up.
that's your day off and to do.
Well, it's their day out of
what you have
town
to
in
catch.
my case.
Yeah.
Like during the
Yeah.
week I'm here, during the
Exactly.
weekends I'm not.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I appreciate what Sarah's trying to get
I
at, because I
agree.
don't disagree
Yeah.
with the fact that by the end of some of those
I know,
meetings,
it's
I'd
hard.
probably vote to have myself run out of town, just to get it over with, but,
I second that.
yeah, thank you.
yeah. No, if the
But,
vote were to end at 9, that
Yeah.
I might be behind,
Yeah.
but
You know,
But-
speaks-
I guess I'd just suggest let Sarah make her case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
like
a
a-
question.
Oh, so we're tabling this.
Yes.
Another table. At the end of our meetings, we always find that we're losing all our members, and do we have a quorum?
Right.
And we always seem to be at an important article, or. is
It's
it
always
that
the
we
school
put-
is always
Right.
at the cusp
Can
of
we
it.
look at maybe rearranging items or something? Because it's happened so many times, and things have passed that would never have passed, or vice versa. Most times it's just people go, I want to go home, and that's it. To take another look at,
I mean, part of the problem is it's very hard to predict.
Where you're gonna fall.
You know, other than the first 4 or 5, you know, you're gonna get to that to the first, but sometimes we go through 15 motions on the first night, and
We
it's
get
the
hung up on that
16th one that
$1,000
everyone gets stuck on,
item.
and other times we go through 4,
we won't put the
and
consent agenda.
then, you know,
An electronic
No.
voting.
you know, because I mean, they do try, for example, with the school budget, I know they do try to work it so that people are fresh and they try not to take up the school budget at 10 o'clock or, but it is hard because it's so, because we've all seen the 45-minute discussion about the $2,000 playground set.
Right.
And
Right,
about
and the
just-
reality
Or
is you
was it down by
can't.
your area where
At the
they had
end,
that
you can-
1,000, you know,
Right.
that strip of
Yes.
land that we, for $1,000?
Yes,
We
yeah.
talked for almost an hour
Yes.
about selling a piece of property for $1,000, which was worthless to anybody but the
Yeah.
abutter.
I mean,
And
it's just-
I mean, I was lucky they got $1,000 because I would have given them a buck if they wanted to transfer it. That was about
And
it.
there's a good example of a consent agenda item, but yet somebody's gonna wanna discuss
Yeah,
it.
that wouldn't make it.
Because
to
it's a
consent.
That wouldn't make it.
And it's only $1,000.
Yeah, but it wouldn't, that wouldn't.
See?
Dollar amount's not gonna make
So,
it. Is
This conversation, though, the point that we have rules we can recommend, and we can make general recommendations, but I wonder should we focus on the rules and then continue for a while, focusing on sort of process that is, like recommendations we might make in terms of, I know this is a pejorative at the moment, but streamlining some of the
And
process?
just to be what's transparent, use the word we're all supposed to use. I just made up that part about us making recommendations. You know.
No, but I think it's,
Technically, we're making rules. Nobody can stop us from recommending.
no, absolutely.
anything
But I think we as a
recommend.
body could decide whether or not that's something we think is worthwhile for us to do, to try and make recommendations. I mean, we've talked about how maybe some of the materials are presented isn't the most efficient, or maybe we don't necessarily need to have every line item. We could recommend that they group things within the, so I'm just curious
Yeah,
if that's
I
something
mean,
that we as a body want to consider.
My favorite pet peeve is that the moderator ought to be able to just read the motion. The thing where the moderator says, we have a motion from the FinCom, now I'll hear from the chairman of the FinCom, Mr. FinCom, would you read the motion, please don't read out all the numbers, it would be much more efficient and loses nothing to say, the next motion is 37, it's motion this, it's motion for $387,000 from Kava, and just have the moderator read the motion.
Pursuant to Article,
Can
Chapter
that-
77, Article
Yeah,
4,
whatever.
subsection
Yeah.
3.
Can that happen, or does the FinCom have to
No.
present it?
No, it's our,
No, the motion has to be made in the warrant,
The FinCom is supposed to
propose it,
propose the
Yes.
budget,
yes, absolutely.
so.
But not
But that
necessarily
doesn't mean that they have to read,
propose it, but not necessarily present it to town
Right.
meeting, even though it's already been proposed?
it's proposed in the warrant.
We need to present it to the town meeting for their vote.
But that,
and that's what
It's
this
in the,
is.
it's in the bylaws.
That's what this
right?
is.
Yeah.
Like,
Present it.
That's the
Yeah.
presentation.
So it's a bylaw, not a rule.
The bylaw.
but also
The
present
bylaw or,
means a lot of different things.
Well, and also the difference between the town meeting, what does it take, 10 seconds to say, Mrs. Haley,
Yeah.
or Mr. Plasko, or whatever, rather than David? I mean, it
Yeah.
really isn't,
No.
you gotta read the motion, it doesn't matter who's.
And then you have to, then the board that presents it speaks to it most of the time.
Right, and that's,
So you're
Is
gonna
what
have
it
to
is.
hear from the board anyway.
Well, do we want to think about for next time, if there's any, we've got certainly more
Yes.
business to do.
Yeah.
We've got some more exciting votes to have.
yes, I'd ask everybody to think about not only rule changes, but also recommendations for procedure change. And not even necessarily for streamlining, for making
Yeah, we'll
town
make things
meetings
clearer
better.
or easier for people to follow.
a
Yeah.
better decision-making.
So what about capital
Process.
projects?
About what?
Definition of
There
a
you
capital
go
project.
again.
Yes, John.
I think you said our goal is to have our report ready to hand off for the special town meeting?
That's what I would like to do.
And when is that?
Don't know.
October
First-
7th.
Yeah,
October
October
7th.
7th.
Wow.
First
Did they-
Monday,
They
second
decide a
Monday
date?
in October.
So we
Tuesday?
have,
Yeah, we were.
we have
Second week in
about 6 weeks.
Yeah,
okay.
that's doable.
And does that
Says the
affect
guy
it?
who took a month to schedule a meeting.
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering, actually, that's where I was headed, is when should our next meeting be? Anticipating that one more won't be enough.
Right. Let me start by suggesting September 5th, which is a Thursday. I think we established that Thursday seems to be the best day for everybody, group-wise.
Like, the 19th, FinCom is meeting in here.
Yeah, the 19th I can't do anyways.
Yeah.
It's open for me.
Yeah, works
say
for
the
me.
fifth?
I can do the
Fifth
5th.
is
yeah.
fine.
All right.
Yep.
5th is okay for me.
All right.
That's what I said,
And,
what am I booking for?
I won't be here.
The only problem with Thursdays after the 5th and the 12th are
You're
good
just
for
a
me. The
problem.
19th and the 26th, I'm not available.
Well, that's what I was gonna suggest. John made this suggestion last time, and I didn't pick up on it, and I probably should have. How about the 12th, or a meeting after that?
So 2 weeks in a row.
2 weeks in a
How
row.
are you, Jerry?
And if we get everything done on the 5th, that'd be great. We'll have the 12th off.
Well, I won't be here on the 5th, so
On
You
the
taking the
5th, you
the 5th, I'll be in New York.
How about the 12th?
The 12th, I will be here.
Has anybody's preference for Thursday actually changed? Like, is there anyone who?
I think it's more that different people have antipathy for the other 4 days.
Well, no, I mean, I guess it was. I couldn't remember if there was.
Yeah, if it's John,
I'm
I know
fine.
you suggested Thursdays, but are there other days that,
I think it depends on the day,
the week,
for me.
right?
Right.
at least it is.
Yes,
But that's
can
what-
we look at other days of the week
Instead
and
of,
see what,
So is the 4th just as bad for you, Jerry?
the 4th is an NCM board meeting.
Okay, all right.
Uh,
So we got the 12th.
Oh, that'd be good.
We've got the 12th.
At 7?
Ann says this room is taken on the 19th. 26th,
26th, I'm out of town.
all, that whole week, or is there any day that? week?
I'm going, well, that's 25th, I think is, oh, 25th, we've got,
Oh,
public hearing.
I'm gone that.
Anybody want a Saturday meeting, not per?
I'm very close to that
Well, let's
window,
have it the
watch
7th.
How about the 18th? So it's a Wednesday. That's a Wednesday after our
I-
Thursday meeting.
I cannot, as my son turns 16 that day.
All right, that takes
I will be
priority.
home drinking heavily.
That takes priority.
What, could,
We'll just
could
start
we
drinking on the
simply walk
16th.
through each of the candidate days? And if anyone has an objection, then we go on to the next one. There may be things between Labor Day and the 5th that that people can do.
It's fair.
So start with the 3rd and just see what happens.
I'm gonna say yes to everything at this point because I don't have my calendar and I'm sure I'm fine.
The third is the Tuesday.
Kept my
Thursday,
calendar open.
Tuesday,
Tuesday
there's no
the
reason,
third.
I mean, this room wouldn't be free.
I can, no, I can do
I'm
the
not
third.
hearing happy sounds over there.
How about the third?
Third,
I can do the
Peter?
third.
3rd is fine.
Third?
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 Yep.
Third, whoa,
these
winner.
are three, see?
Ding, 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 ding,
Yeah.
ding, 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 ding.
All right.
So if we got 9/3 and
As long as my
9/12,
dermatology appointment
Yeah,
was okay.
that's fine with me. 9, 3, 9, 12. That
Who,
works for me.
who had trouble with the 12th?
oh, did you, no, no.
No, I had
tell us
trouble
about
Jerry.
with
the
the
fifth.
fifth.
The 5th was her
Terrific.
problem. So 9/3 and 9/12.
Perfect.
And that still leaves us with 3 weeks if we,
Right.
Yeah.
More.
Yeah.
So 9/3.
All right, great.
Up, see, that 3 is from heaven. We're supposed to have 3 people that have to agree to this. Thank you so much. It's a sign.
So,
All right.
Town hall someplace.
Motion to
Motion
adjourn.
adjourned. Seconded?
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye, aye, aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.